Good morning. I'm honored to be here. I bring you greetings from Fort Worth, Texas in the United States. The subject that I've been asked to address this morning is the sexual revolution and cultural Marxism, terms that we've heard already several times throughout our Congress, and my hope is to unpack and give you a little history to those movements. The perfect storm is an expression to describe the forceful collective impact of a distinctive set of circumstances. Each circumstance, while somewhat substantial on its own, when taken together, can yield significant, even catastrophic results. The sexual revolution, second and third wave feminism, and cultural Marxism combine in just such a manner. And young women today are some of the most severely affected victims of this perfect storm of converging ideologies. Consider just one example. Back in 2012, a Brazilian college student, Catarina Miglorini, auctioned off her virginity online to the highest bidder. It was won by a Japanese millionaire for over $750,000. Catarina justified her actions, saying that she had not found the right person to have sex with. She was just 20 at the time. And that taking part in the auction was more sane than having sex with a drunken stranger at a party. Her parents supported the action, seeing the auction as a way to pay for college. She stated, "I know that this is not a very conventional decision, but it is my decision. I am the sole owner of my body, I am of legal age, and I have the right." Miglorini was held up as progressive and enlightened by contemporary feminists. Stories like Miglorini's should cause us to shudder. How do we live in a world where such approaches to sex are passed off as natural, normal, and enlightened? Where are the people crying out against such lunacy? Friends, you and I must be those people. We must stand against the movements of cultural Marxism and the sexual revolution and point people back to God's plan for humanity. As those people who push back the darkness, it is crucial to understand exactly what it is that we are fighting against today. So let's turn to a brief history of cultural Marxism first. It is a branch of Western Marxism, and it's also sometimes referred to as critical theory, postmodernism, deconstructionism, political correctness, or multiculturalism. It is an ideology that says that all history has been determined by those in power, because those in power create culture which then can construct and perpetuate inequalities. These inequalities, they say, relate to race and culture, religion, family, gender, and sexual orientation. Cultural Marxists often try to eradicate these inequalities by essentially manipulating and censoring culture. Often today we see that through controlling mass media, a thought which I will return to in just a moment. This movement, the history, began shortly after World War I, when two Marxist theorists, Antonio Gramsci from Italy and George Lukács in Hungary, concluded that Western culture and the Christian religion had so blinded the working class to its true Marxist class interests that communism was impossible in the West until both could be destroyed. That is, they believed economic Marxism could not prevail until cultural Marxism destroyed Western culture and Christianity. In 1919, when George Lukács became Deputy Commissar of Culture in Hungary, one of his first acts, this is in 1919, was to introduce sex education in Hungary's public schools. He knew that if he could destroy the West's traditional sexual morals, he would have taken a big step towards destroying Western culture itself. In 1923, inspired in part by Lukács, a group of German Marxists established a think tank in Frankfurt University in Germany called the Institute for Social Research. This institute, soon known simply as the Frankfurt School, which people have already mentioned as part of our program. This is what became the creator of cultural Marxism. When Hitler came to power in Germany in 1933, the Frankfurt School fled and reestablished itself in New York City. There, it shifted its focus from destroying culture in Germany to destroying Western culture in the United States. They began with trying to destroy the family. One of the leaders of the Frankfurt School, Herbert Marcuse, set his sights on college students to lead them to cultural Marxist ideas with the publication of his book, Eros and Civilization. He argued that by freeing sex from any restraints, we could elevate the pleasure principle over the reality principle and create a society with no work, only play. He's the one that popularized the idea of make love, not war. Marcuse also argued for what he called a liberating tolerance, which he defined as tolerance for all ideas coming from the left and intolerance for any ideas coming from the right. Make no mistake, cultural Marxists tried to deconstruct perceived existing power structures as Western culture and Christianity, yet they constructed their own power system, where the voices who dare to contradict their thoughts regarding the family or sex are branded intolerant. The irony is that the freedom promised to the followers of cultural Marxism and that later those acolytes of the sexual revolution has actually enslaved them. Let's now turn to a brief history of the sexual revolution and secular feminism and see how these movements are working hand in hand with cultural Marxism to destroy the family and harm young women today. The sexual revolution was initiated by those who shared a belief in the detrimental impact of sexual repression. This movement in the 60s was an uprising rooted in the conviction that the erotic should be celebrated as a normal part of life and not repressed by family, industrialized sexual morality, religion, and the state. This revolution was ushered in on several fronts. However, among feminists, the sexual revolution found some of its greatest soldiers. In America, the second wave of feminism in the 1960s and 70s emerged through the publication of Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique. These decades in the United States saw the approval of the birth control pill, the legalization of abortion, and the organization of the National Organization of Women, which sought to be a political voice for change in the interests of women. One of the key battlegrounds was marriage. In 1969, a leaflet entitled, "Do You Know the Facts About Marriage?" was produced to hand out at a protest at the New York Licensed Marriage Bureau. It ended with this statement, quote, "We cannot destroy the inequalities between men and women until we destroy marriage. We must free ourselves, and marriage is the place to begin," end of quote. The message at the heart of this wave was that marriage actually held women back. Feminists told women that investing in your husband and your family was actually a threat to freedom and flourishing for women. As the 21st century dawned, the third wave of secular feminism emerged. By this time, the message of the feminist movement was firmly entrenched within popular culture. As one writer observed, feminism is a given. We read it, we watch it, we think it, we breathe it. Whenever a concept so thoroughly permeates a culture, it's hard to step back and notice it at work. Feminism has profoundly altered our culture's concept of what it means to be a woman. Women in this wave seek to include voices of women that were not represented previously in this movement. Women of color, lesbians, bisexuals, transgendered women, low-income women, and women in developing nations. They have also new attitudes towards sexuality. Today's culture is porn positive. You only have to turn the TV on or walk down the street and look at billboards to see that attitudes towards sexuality have changed. Whereas second wave feminists were burning Playboys, third wave feminists will wear the emblem of the Playboy bunny on a t-shirt or as a necklace to show that they are an enlightened, empowered woman. By embracing and controlling their sexuality, many women feel that they have taken the power from those that would want to objectify them. So what role has the media played in perpetuating the ideas of feminism, the sexual revolution, and cultural Marxism? Well, continued exposure to something takes away the shock value. The media's reach is extensive, and the mass media are teachers whose principal strategy of communication is redundancy. By exposing people to the same idea over and over and over again, what once was shocking becomes commonplace. What once skirted the margins becomes mainstream. Consider sexuality. While different forms of media have unquestionably simply reflected already shifting perspectives on sexuality over the last few decades, media has played a role in swaying perspectives. Think about biblical sexuality, the idea of one man and one woman joining an exclusive, lifelong union of marriage. This idea, the idea that marriage is the only appropriate setting for sexuality and sexual intimacy, is a shocking concept in our culture today. What the Bible calls sin in regards to sexuality, sex outside of marriage, adultery, lust, homosexuality, this is now the new normal. Visibility often leads to acceptance. So how have all of these factors come together in a perfect storm to harm young women? There are many ways, but for sake of time, I mention only two. First, we see the hypersexualization of girls and young women. A few years ago, a new book made headlines for its shocking discussion of the sexual lives of teen girls. The book was entitled "Oral Sex is the New Goodnight Kiss." And it indicates that girls are taught to feel empowered when they are the sexual center of attention. The book lays blame at culture, including advertising and media, that has sexualized young girls and teenagers. In America, drunk, underage girls bare their breasts in Girls Gone Wild videos. T-shirts for girls say "porn star," "the rumors are true," "I know what boys want," emblazoned across the chest. Sweatpants for young girls have "juicy," "yummy," "sexy," and "sweet" written across the backside. The current brand identity for girls is clear, that they are something to be consumed. Hollywood, in programs geared to teenagers, often glamorize the idea of young women who are sexually aggressive and loose. Western culture has stopped protecting its girls. We have abandoned our protective role for young women. They're made to grow up much too quickly. And the culture has allowed this hypersexualization and told young women it shows how empowered they are. Secondly, sexual intimacy has been devalued. Friends with benefits, hooking up, sexting, these ideas are commonplace among teenage and young women's culture. Sexual intimacy has become casual, no longer signifying a commitment. And culture parades the idea of no strings attached, instead of portraying sex as a sign of marital commitment. Sex has lost its value because it is everywhere. To be sex positive in our culture today means you are willing to do whatever you want with whomever. So in conclusion, where do we go from here? Do you remember the Hans Christian Andersen story, The Emperor's New Clothes? Two weavers fool an emperor into believing that his new clothing, which actually doesn't exist, is invisible to those who are unfit for their positions, stupid or incompetent. When the emperor processes before his people in his new clothes, no one dares to say that they don't see any suit or that he's walking around naked. Finally, though, a child cries out, "He isn't wearing anything at all." Friends, you and I must be like that child, crying out against the lunacy of our modern culture, calling it exactly what it is, harmful and disastrous. This perfect storm brought on by cultural Marxism and the sexual revolution that is raging in our culture today must be stopped. We must continue to stand for the family, especially since social movements like the sexual revolution and cultural Marxism, are seeking to destroy it and eradicate it. We must be the people who will loudly proclaim that the hypersexualization of young women is not empowerment, and that sexual intimacy is reserved for the marriage bed. Simply, we must proclaim the truth over and over and over again, no matter how politically incorrect it may be. Thank you.
Thank you.